Today is a big day. Be'ezras Hashem, with God's help, we begin yet another book of the Rambam's Mishneh Torah, the first comprehensive compendium covering all of Jewish law. This is the sixth book. We now have, thank God, been going for over 300 consecutive days, studying every day a chapter of the Rambam's magnum opus. And today we begin book number 6. As the Rambam always does, he opens up with a quote from a verse that matches the theme of this upcoming book. And he chooses a verse, in this case, from Tehillim, from Psalms chapter 119, Nidvais pi ritzei na Hashem umishpatecha lamdeni. The offerings, the voluntary offerings of my mouth, please desire, Hashem, please accept with favor, and teach me your laws. David HaMelech, in context, was asking for Hashem that any time he prays or offers something with his words, they should be pleasant and acceptable to Hashem. And as a result of that, David should merit to understand more of Hashem's laws. And this verse is very apropos to this book, which is called Sefer Shishi, the sixth book, Vuhu Sefer Hafla, which is the book of, literally Hafla means verbal expression, an utterance. Because this book is all about laws that go into effect upon a person's verbal declaration. As the Rambam right away lists, as he always does in the beginning of every book, the different sections of laws that we're going to be discussing in this book, Hilchos of Arba v'zehu Sidura. There are 4 sets of laws in this book, and this is their order. Hilchos Shevuos, the laws of oaths. Hilchos Nedarim, the laws of vows. Oaths and vows, we're going to see, are very different in halacha. And the primary difference between them is that when one makes an oath using the word I swear, what happens is the prohibition is imposed on the person. The man or the woman becomes forbidden to do whatever act they bound themselves by the oath. When you make a vow, however, the vow is chal, that's the Hebrew word. The vow takes effect or rests on the object. That's the object of the vow. It's called in Hebrew gavra and chefza. Oaths are a prohibition on a person, vows are a prohibition on an object. We're going to see this concept coming up repeatedly as we explore in detail these laws of oaths and vows. Third set of laws is Hilchos Nazirus, the laws of the Nazirite vow. It's a type of vow, but it's a very specific type of vow. A person takes upon himself to become a Nazir, comes along with 3 major restrictions. He needs to grow his hair long, haircuts are not allowed. He cannot come into contact with any dead body, and he cannot consume any derivative of a grape. So not the grapes, not wine, not grape juice, not even grape seeds or grape peels, as we're going to see. So it's a very specific section within the wider umbrella of the laws of vows, so that Rambam makes it into a separate category of laws, as well as Hilchos Erchin v'Charamin. The laws of Erchin literally means evaluations, but it has a very specific connotation in the Torah context. It's when a person promises to contribute the value of a human being to Hashem. Now, human beings have no intrinsic value. A human life is priceless. Yet the Torah, in the end of the 3rd book of Vayikra, gives a list of the Torah's price, so to speak, on every single man and woman. It categorizes it by age. From this age to this age, when a person says, I promise to contribute X's value to the temple, he needs to give this amount. From this age to that age, depending if you're a man or a woman, the value changes. That's called Erchim. And the Rambam discusses those laws in the 4th section, as well as Charamim. Charamim also literally mean consecration, but also has a very specific connotation where a person decrees some of his property to be cherem, to be consecrated to God. It follows a certain set of laws. The common denominator between all of these laws is that they are a result of an utterance, of a hafla'ah, of a verbal expression. Because you say something, you become bound by that expression that you made. And so it's apropos that the Rambam chooses the verse we mentioned in the beginning, because more than in a way, David HaMelech was just asking for beautiful words that he expresses to be accepted by God. In this book, we're actually going to be talking about offerings that are made by the mouth, things that become godly because of the way we express them. Our behavior is dictated by certain things that we say. And as an introduction to this book, the Rambam asks that when we discuss all the laws of these verbal expressions, they should be acceptable by Hashem. Umishpatecha lamdeni, he should indeed give us the merit that we should learn all of the applicable laws as we are going to, with God's help, throughout the next month and a half or so as we cover this book. A good piece of news, I guess, is that unlike in previous books where chapters on average were longer, in this book, on average, they're shorter. So that's just going to be good for the length of our classes. At any rate, we begin the first set of laws, Hilchos Shevuos, the laws of oaths. As the Rambam does, when he begins any section of laws, he gives us the mitzvahs, because of course the Rambam's whole book is centered around counting and codifying the 613 mitzvahs. He doesn't do it in the list that they appear in the Torah, like other codifiers do. He arranged his book topically. And so before he begins a given topic, he tells you which of the 613 mitzvahs are going to be discussed in this set of laws. Yesh bichlolon chamesh mitzvahs. In this first set of laws, the laws of oaths, we cover 5 of the 613 mitzvahs. Achas mitzvahs aseh, the arba mitzvahs leisaseh. 1 of them is a positive commandment, and 4 are negative commandments. V'zehu praton, and these are their details. Aleph, mitzvah number 1 is shalei lishava bishmoi lasheker, not to swear with God's name falsely. As we're going to see, according to the Rambam, a true oath, a Torah oath, is only formulated when God's name is a part of it. The way an oath is formulated is typically you would say, I swear by God's name that I will do X, Y, and Z, or that I won't do X, Y, and Z. So we're not allowed to swear with using Hashem's name falsely. Beis shalei lisashmai lashav. We're not allowed to lift God's name in vain. This is a specific commandment for a specific type of false oath that the Rambam will describe today. It's called a useless oath. And when one makes a useless oath using Hashem's name, he's literally taking Hashem's name in vain. The first mitzvah could be you make a real oath, you intend to keep it, and then you don't keep it, now you've retroactively used God's name falsely. But some oaths to begin with, when you pronounce them, they are in essence useless, and that transgresses another type of commandment, the commandment of taking God's name in vain, which in fact is one of the 10 commandments. The third one, lo tisa, is this commandment. Gimel, shalei lichbar b'fikadon. The third mitzvah discussed in this set of laws is the prohibition against denying a deposit. If somebody deposited money by you, or an object by you for safekeeping, and later they come and ask for it back, and you know about it, that you do have it, and you deny ever having it, you transgress a negative commandment. Furthermore, Dalid, shaleli shava al kfiras mamin. There's also a prohibition to swear to substantiate your claim of denial of money. So, in other words, typically the way it would happen is somebody gives you a watch for safekeeping, and they come back after the trip asking for the watch. If you say, I don't have the watch, you've already transgressed one prohibition. If they then say, I don't believe you, swear to substantiate your words, and you take the oath to corroborate your denial, and that oath was also false, now you've transgressed a second prohibition. So when it comes to money denial, there are 2 prohibitions involved. And the 5th mitzvah, hey, lishava bishmai be'emes. There is a mitzvah, on the other hand, to swear using God's name when it's meant truthfully. In other words, even though there's so many negative prohibitions associated with swearing, doesn't mean we should completely stay away from it. When we have to, and when we're supposed to, it's actually a mitzvah to swear using Hashem's name properly. Ubir mitzvah seilu b'prakimelu. The explanation of these mitzvahs is coming in the following 12 chapters, God willing. We're going to be on this topic for close to 2 weeks. Perek Rishain, chapter 1, the Rambam begins. And the Rambam was incredibly organized. The way he presents this is just so, it's so geschmack. It's so pleasurable and easy to learn. The way he lays out for us the principles underlying the concept of oaths. Says the Rambam, halacha aleph, arba mine shvuos hein. Halachically speaking, there are 4 types of oaths that a person can take. Shevuos bitoy, the oath of expression. We're going to define each of these in detail. The oath of expression, this is like the basic oath. Ushvuos shav, a useless oath. Ushvuos hapikadon, the oath associated with a deposit. Ushvuos ha'edos, and the oath associated with testimony. What are exactly these 4 types of oaths? So in this chapter, we're going to get a little bit of delineation, and then we're going to go back and get even more delineation, more details in the coming chapters. Shevuos bitoy, hu shenemar b'Torah. The oath of expression is the one about which it says in the Torah the following verse. Oy nefesh. The Torah is describing a series of cases where a person is liable to bring a certain offering because of a sin that he did. One of them is, or, that's why the verse begins with the word or, because it's in context. Or a soul, kisishava levate bisvasayim. If the soul swears by expression of the lips, here's where the word bitoy comes from. It's a borrowed term from the Torah. The Torah describes the oath as an expression of the lips. And the person expresses verbally, lehara oy lehetiv, to do something negative or something positive. and we'll define these later. The point is a person made a verbal expression to a certain effect, and then he either keeps or transgresses that oath. When that oath is made, it's called a Shevuos bitoy, an oath of expression. To be more detailed, the Shevuos bitoy, the oath of expression itself, has 4 categories. Shtayim lahabo, shtayim l'sha'avar. 2 types of oaths of expressions can be uttered with a futuristic tense. The way you formulate it is you speak about the future. Ushtayim l'sha'avar, and 2 types of Shevuos bitoy, 2 types of oaths of expressions are formulated in the past tense. Positive and negative, future and past. That's the 4 categories. Kigoin. For example, shenishba al davar sha'avar, shenasa shalei nasa. One can swear about something which already happened, that it was done or that it was not done. A person can also swear about something coming in the future, that it will be done or that it will not be done. I'll give an example in a moment. The guiding principle about the oaths of expressions is that they only apply to things that are possible in the capacity of a person to do. If you made an oath about something that's impossible for you to do, as we'll soon see later in this chapter, it goes into the category of useless oath, not oath of expression. Oath of expression is only things that are in the realm of possibility. Bein lehaba, bein l'sha'avar, and again, they can be formulated in the future tense or in the past. Ketzad l'sha'avar. What would be an example of a Shevuos bitoy, an oath of expression formulated in the past? The example would be sha'achalti, oy shazarakti even layam, oy shadiber pleini im pleini. A person would say, I swear that I ate a sandwich. I swear that I threw a stone into the ocean. I swear that Mr. A spoke to Mr. B. That's formulated in the past. And it's also a positive expression. It's swearing that something did happen in the past. Oy, alternatively, a person can formulate a past tense in the negative. Shaloi achalti. Oy shaloi zarakti even layam. Oy shaloi diber pleini im pleini. I swear that I did not eat. I did not throw a stone into the ocean. Mr. A did not speak to Mr. B. Now, as I mentioned when we were learning the mitzvahs, that truly every oath is formulated beginning with the words, I swear by God's name. And we'll see more about that tomorrow. But the Rambam is just using it in short, giving you the bottom line of the oath. The bottom line of the oath was that it was referring to an action that either was or was not done in the past. Ketzad lahaba. What would be an example of formulating a Shevuos bitoy, an oath of expression, on the future? Sha'oichal oy shaloi oichal. It's where a person would say, I swear that I will eat, or that I will not eat. I swear that I will throw, or I will not throw a stone into the ocean. You now have 2 categories of oaths of expressions. Past, positive and negative, and 2 going to the future, also positive and negative. Halacha gimel, nishba achas me'arba machlekes elu. If a person took an oath in either one of these 4 formulations, and then he acted in contradiction to his oath. For example, he takes an oath, swearing that he will not eat today, and then he ends up eating. Or the opposite, he takes an oath that he will eat today, and he ends up not eating. Or he formulates it in the past. I swear that I ate today, and it turns out he didn't have any breakfast. Or he swears I didn't eat, and it turns out that he actually did. At this point, the moment he acts against his oath, the oath has turned into a Shevuos sheker, a false oath. Shevuos sheker wasn't one of the categories of the types of oaths, because the 4 types of oaths in the beginning of halacha number 1 was 4 types of oaths when they are uttered. When they are uttered, one is an oath of expression, one is a useless oath, one is a deposit oath, one is a testimony oath. The false oath only happens later. You can turn a Shevuos bitoy into a Shevuos sheker. You can turn an oath of expression into a false oath by transgressing it. And it is about this type of transgression and similar that the Torah says, Lo yisishavu bishmi lashaker. And the Torah actually has a vav. V'lo yisishavu bishmi lashaker. Do not swear in my name falsely. This is exactly what the Torah had in mind. The Torah had in mind, don't take an oath and then act against it. Or don't take an oath which is revealed to be untrue. If a person does transgress this prohibition, he swears falsely. If he did so intentionally, he gets lashes. And if one transgresses inadvertently, He wasn't aware that it was forbidden. He wasn't aware that he was acting in transgression of his oath. We'll see many examples in the coming days. Maybe karban oila v'yarded. He brings what's called the fluctuating sacrifice. There are certain cases in the Torah where we have what's called a standard sin offering. A person does a sin, he brings a standard offering. There are special categories where a person does a sin and he has to bring a fluctuating sacrifice, which means, depending on his financial means, he'll bring a progressively more expensive sacrifice. The poorest of the poor will bring just a flour offering, a little richer. He'll bring a bird offering, a little richer. He'll bring an animal offering. This is one of those sins that requires a fluctuating sacrifice to be brought after transgressing it inadvertently. Shenemar, as it says, and this is in the verse where the oath of expression is described. We read before the red letters, now we read the blue letters. V'nela mimenu, if the matter was concealed from him, v'hu yada v'oshem, and then he finds out that he is guilty, v'goymer, etc. As the verse continues, he needs to bring a fluctuating sacrifice. A person made an oath of expression. He promised to do something or not to do something, or he swore that he did or didn't do something, and it turns out that it's false. In the case, v'nela mimenu, in the case where it's concealed, he brings a sacrifice. Purposely, he gets lashes. That covers category number 1 of oaths, the oath of expression, Shevuos bitoy. Second category, Shevuos shav, the useless oath. The useless oath, nechlekes la'arba machlekes, like the oath of expression, also has 4 categories. But not 4 categories in the way that you formulate it, 4 separate categories, 4 types of oaths that are considered to be useless oaths. Ha'achas, number 1, shenishba al davar hayodua she'ein kain. He swears about an obvious matter that it's not so. The way I called it over here, number A, is contradicting reality. You make an oath contradicting reality, you have just made a useless oath. Ketzad, what would be an example of that? A person swears about a man that he's a woman. Or about a woman that it's a man. Kind of sensitive for the modern day ear. But that's a fact. There are men and there are women. And if a person makes an oath against that reality, he has made a useless oath. Similarly, a person makes an oath about a marble pillar, that it's gold, or anything like that. If you contradict reality, you've made a useless oath. Second category, says the Rambam Malachahei, Hashniya, category number 2 of a useless oath, Shenishbal davar yodua, she'ein bei safek la'adam shehu kain. A person swears about a matter so obvious that nobody is in doubt about it, and he swears to the veracity of that fact. So what I called here, stating the obvious. If you make an oath corroborating an obvious reality, you've also made a useless oath. A person swears about the sky, says, I swear that's the sky. Or that this stone is a stone. Or I swear that the number 2 is 2. Nobody thought differently. Anything similar is in the category of useless oath. These matters, any complete person, any mentally sound person has no doubt about it. To have to corroborate or substantiate the matter with an oath. An oath is usually looked at as a means to, hammer down a certain fact. Somebody might not think that what you're saying is true. Boom, you come down with an oath. Oh, now you're taking it seriously. But if it's something that's so obvious that nobody thought otherwise, so making an oath about it is useless. It's Shevuos shav. Shlishis, halacha vav, the third category of a useless oath, shenishba levatel es hamitzvah. It's a uniquely Jewish concept. A person makes an oath to nullify his observance of a mitzvah. It's a useless oath. The commentaries explain, Talmud explains, Mushba v'oimed mehar Sinai. A Jew, from the moment they receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, is under oath to fulfill all of the Torah's commandments. So you can't make an oath to undo an oath. We already swore to God that we're going to do whatever He wants. So we don't have the right to make an oath to contradict that. So when we swear, if we swear, against doing a mitzvah, then the oath is useless. Ketzad, what would be an example of that? A person makes an oath, he's not going to wrap himself with tzitzis. Now this requires some nuance here, because as we learned in the second book of the Rambam, in the laws of tzitzis, there is no actual obligation to wear tzitzis. The obligation is, if you wear a 4-cornered garment, then you have to put tzitzis on the 4 corners. So therefore the commentaries explain that what the Rambam means over here is that the person makes an oath that he's going to wear a 4-cornered garment and he's not going to put tzitzis on it. That's the meaning of the oath here. Or, Shallah Yilbash Tefillin, a person makes an oath, he's not going to wear tefillin. It's an obligation on every Jewish male after 13 years old to wear tefillin every weekday. He says, no, I'm not doing it. He makes an oath, he's not going to sit in the sukkah during the holiday of Sukkot. That's the biblical obligation. During those 7 days, we sit in the sukkah every time we eat. Some people even sleep in the sukkah. Ideally, as we saw in the third book, you should do everything you do in the sukkah. He says, no, I'm not sitting in the sukkah on Sukkot. He's not eating matzah on Passover night. It's a biblical obligation at the Seder night to eat matzah after nightfall. By the way, totally not related, but I should mention it. Many Jews are unaware of the fact that matzah must be eaten after nightfall. It's not about making a family gathering at 5 p.m. on Erev Pesach and doing a feel-good ceremony of eating matzah. The biblical obligation is only fulfilled when you eat matzah by night, which is difficult in LA especially, and certainly in other areas where the time is late, especially it's after the clock changes and the Seder night can only begin at about 8:30, 8:45. It's not easy, but nobody ever said we have a contract with God to have an easy life. So make sure, this year Pesach is coming up soon, that when we eat the matzah, we eat it after nightfall. But the point is, he says, this guy for our case, he's making an oath, I'm not going to eat matzah on this Passover night. Or an interesting one, he makes an oath to fast on Shabbat and holidays. There's a biblical obligation to eat on Shabbat and holidays. He says, no, I'm not doing it. Anything like this is automatically a useless oath, because you cannot swear to go against your pre-obligation to Hashem. Revis halacha zayin, the fourth category of a useless oath, shenishba davar she'ein koyach belasis. If you swore to something that you don't have the capacity to do, it's physically impossible. Ketzad, what is this? What's an example of this? A person makes an oath, I'm not going to sleep for 3 days straight, day and night, 72 hours. That's what the Torah considers impossible for a person. You cannot go 72 hours without sleep. I know today we have Guinness Book of World Records. Somebody did, I think, 264 hours, like over 11 days without sleep. But definitely on a default level, 72 hours is considered the threshold. So a person makes an oath that he's not going to swear, he's not going to sleep for more than 72 hours. The oath to begin with is useless. As the Rambam will describe in chapter 5, actually, it's so useless that you don't even have to wait to transgress it. You can go to sleep right away. The oath is completely useless to begin with. Or a person makes an oath, he's not going to eat anything for 7 days straight. Anything like this. Physically impossible matter, your oath is useless to begin with. And the Rambam concludes in summary, anybody who takes a useless oath in any of these four categories, again, going against reality, stating the obvious, going against a mitzvah, or something physically impossible, the moment he makes the oath, he already transgresses the negative commandment. In the first category of Shevuos Bitui, you only transgressed when you acted against the oath. Here, the utterance itself is the prohibition, because you've taken God's name in vain. Shenemar, as it says in the Ten Commandments, you shall not lift, you shall not take the name of God, your God, in vain. If he acted purposefully, he gets lashes. And if he was inadvertent, he didn't realize, then he's exempt from anything. We don't give him a punishment at all. Unlike in the case of the oath of expression. You have to bring a sacrifice. Here, no sacrifice is associated. This is the second category of oaths, the oaths that are useless. Third category of oaths. Shevuos hapikadoin ketzad. What is meant by the oath of deposit? Says the Rambam, although I'm using the word deposit, and that is the most general term, because that's usually when you would end up having somebody else's property in your possession is through a deposit. But the truth is it's more broad than that. Kol mi sheyesh mamin chavere biyadeh. Anybody who's holding the property of his friend, bein pikadoin, bein milva, whether it's a physical deposit or it's a loan, or shegazloi, or a person robbed something from his friend, or ashakoi, or withheld wages, or he found a lost object, didn't return it. Bottom line is, you're holding something, money, an object which belongs to your friend. And that friend demands, he charges you with holding his stuff, and he asks for it back. And the holder denies ever having the money. The moment he denies the responsibility, he transgresses the negative commandment. Shenemar, because it says in the verse, Lo yisechachashu, or with a vav in the actual verse. V'lo yisechachashu, do not deny. There's a type of denial which is biblically forbidden. This is a prohibition against denying, owning, or having property belonging to a friend. However, we do not get lashes for this. You only get lashes for a transgression that has a deed associated with it. Here there's no deed. In other cases, if you rob the person, let's say, where you did do a deed, the reason why you don't get lashes is because when you rob, you have to make financial restitution. And we have a rule, ein adam lekeu mashalim. A person doesn't get lashes and also have to make financial payments. So you're making the financial payments, you're not going to get lashes. But the bottom line is, you have transgressed a biblical commandment. If you didn't just deny, but then you went ahead and substantiated your false claim with an oath, you swore falsely about the property which you denied. Now you transgress another prohibition, about which the verse concludes. In the very same verse we just quoted, do not lie one man to a friend. This expression, do not lie a man to a friend, is the prohibition against swearing to the veracity of your false claim that you're denying the property. In other words, this verse is talking about both steps. Don't deny, and then don't swear falsely about the denial. If this oath is indeed taken, it's referred to in the Talmud and Halacha as the oath of deposit, because it's the oath about the deposit. It's the oath about the money that's entrusted, supposed to be entrusted in your hands. What liability does a person incur for making an oath of deposit when he lies? Here's the Torah's punishment. You must repay the principal money that you denied, plus you must add a fifth. So, how do you calculate a fifth? Let's say a person gave me $100. So when you think about it in simple terms, you say you got to pay back the $100 plus a fifth. Typically, you think of a fifth as a fifth of the principal, right? So in the case of 100, a fifth is 20, and so you'd have to pay 120. You're paying 100 plus a fifth. Matter of fact, in Torah law, typically, the fifth is calculated as a fifth of the sum total, which means in the case of 100, you have to give 125. Because this way, when you have the total money, 125, 25 that you added is a fifth. It's a fifth of the total, which is basically calculated as a quarter of the principal. You give a quarter of the principal so that in total you have 5 equal portions of money that can be divided. In this case, again, 125. So you pay the principal, you add the fifth, which is really a quarter, umakriv asham vadai, and then you also need to bring what's called the definite guilt offering. In Torah, we have different types of offerings that are brought for sins. We already mentioned 2, the standard sin offering and the fluctuating sin offering. Then you have what's called the guilt offering, the asham. The guilt offering also has 2 categories. Some of them are definite, where you bring them for a definite sin committed. And there are also what's called an asham talui, a doubtful guilt offering, where you're in a situation where you're unsure if you committed a sin and you have to bring certain offerings for that. The Rambam calls it asham vadai to contrast with asham talui, but it means you have to bring a guilt offering. So you're paying, you're adding some payment, and you're bringing a guilt offering. Bein shahaya mezid, bein shahaya shogeg. This punishment is administered whether you did it purposely or inadvertently. Shenemar, because the verses that talk about denial of money, which is primarily in the end of the portion of Vayikra, right in the beginning of the book of Vayikra, the first portion, the end of the first portion, Shenemar, it says, V'chichesh ba'amisoi b'fikadoi ne'visisumes yad evigazel. If a person, we're just choosing the red words here, a person denies his friend a deposit or money that he had given him, or a robbery, then says the Torah, when a person sins and is found guilty, he needs to return the principal, plus a fifth, and bring an offering. And here, unlike in the case of the oath of expression where we saw in the verse that it said, V'nelam mimenu. When do you bring an offering? Only if the matter is concealed from you. You were acting inadvertently, you didn't realize it was forbidden. In this case, it doesn't say V'nelam mimenu. This means that we're obligating both the person who was acting purposefully, as though he was acting inadvertently, you get the same punishment. Whether you did it on purpose or by mistake, you have to bring the offering plus paying the principal in a fifth. V'hu, says the Rambam, an interesting caveat. This is provided sheyazid b'pikadon ay b'mamen shenischayev by. The only time that you can end up being punished is if you purposely knew that you were holding on to the depositor to the money, v'yeda bay b'shas shvuah, and you were aware of it when you made the oath. Both the case of mezid and shoygeg, when we talk about purposeful and inadvertent, in both cases, you knew about the money that you were holding and you were aware of it when you made the oath. We'll soon see what inadvertent then means. How could you be inadvertent? If you're holding the money, you know you're swearing falsely. We'll see in a second. Avalim shagag v'shachach. But if you were truly inadvertent, in other words, you had forgotten that the person gave you money, and you denied, therefore, on the basis of your mistaken thinking, and you made the oath, and then you found out, you remembered, yeah, actually I do have his money. My mistake, this is not called inadvertent, this is called under duress almost. You were forced by circumstances beyond your control. It was a total mistake. A total mistake, you're totally exempt. Even more so. Similarly, if a person didn't know that it's forbidden to swear falsely about money denial, usually that's considered shogeg, inadvertent. For example, the laws of Shabbat. A person does a forbidden act, and he was unaware that it was forbidden to do this act on Shabbos. You're still called shogeg, you're still called inadvertent, you have to bring a sacrifice. Here, if you were unaware that it's forbidden to swear falsely about money denial, you're not in the category of shogeg, you're in the category of anus. You're under duress. You're totally exempt. Upater. So you'll ask me, in Cain, says the Rambam, if so, hey achi, shigigas shvuas apikodain, what then is considered inadvertent oath of deposit? If I knew about the money, seemingly I'd be purposeful. If I didn't know about the money, you're telling me I am totally exempt. So when am I inadvertent? Says the Rambam, you forgot whether you're liable to a sacrifice. You knew that you had the money. You knew that it was a sin to swear falsely, but you weren't aware of the extent of the punishment you would incur. You knew it's forbidden. You knew he had the money by you. This is called inadvertent. You weren't aware of the full extent of the korban sacrifice requirement. That's when you're considered to be shaygig. In the case of purposefully would mean one step over that. You knew it's forbidden, you knew you had the money, and you also knew the full extent of the punishment that was coming your way. That's a purposeful act. Both of those cases, you have to pay back the principal, add the fifth, and bring a sacrifice. Yud Beis, that covers the third category. And now we're on to the fourth and final category of oaths. Shevuos ha'edus ketzad. What is meant by the oath of testimony? Ha'edim sheyadu edus mamin. We're talking about two witnesses who were aware of some financial information which could be used in a court case. Utvam bal ha'edus laha'idlai. And the person who needed the testimony demanded that they come and testify. They denied any awareness of their testimony, and they in fact did not testify. And they also swore to that effect. They swore, we don't know anything that can help you in your case. And then it's discovered that they're lying. That's called the oath of testimony. It was a false oath uttered in connection with testimony to a case. The obligation for this oath is a fluctuating sin offering. Depending on how much you can afford, that's how much you have to give. And this again, whether you're purposeful or inadvertent. And again, we're going to define in a second, inadvertent, not as being unaware of the prohibition. You were unaware of the full extent of the punishment. Shenemar, because it says, this is another verse, in the end of the portion of Vayikra, v'nefesh kisecheta, when a soul commits a sin, v'shama koil Allah, and it hears the voice of a curse. It's a very specific meaning. It means the people heard somebody asking them to make an oath about the testimony. The word Allah, though it literally means a curse, we're going to see tomorrow, it has the connotation of beginning the formulation of an oath. So a soul heard an oath. In other words, it heard somebody adjuring them. The word adjure in Old English means to put somebody under oath. They heard somebody putting them under oath about testimony. V'hu ate. And he indeed was a witness. He could have testified, etc. Then you get punished. Again over here, doesn't say the word v'nelam. It has to be concealed. You have to be inadvertent. You're liable both when you're purposeful and when you're inadvertent. What qualifies as an inadvertent testimony oath? You lost track of the fact that you're liable to a sacrifice. You were aware that this oath is prohibited. You were aware that what you're saying is false, but you were just unaware that it would require you to bring a sacrifice. Uzdaina sheyeda shecheven ala karban. Purposefully means you know you're liable to a sacrifice. Avalim lo yada shehi asura, or sheshachachu ha'edos v'nishbu. But if they didn't know that it's forbidden, or they literally forgot that they have testimony, in the moment they forgot that they could actually help the case. Then they found out later that they actually knew testimony and they swore falsely. In this case, you're actually considered under duress. It's beyond your control. You're completely exempt even from a sacrifice. Like the case of the deposit, in both of these cases, in order to be punishable, you have to not only know that what you're doing is forbidden, but you have to know the full extent of the punishment you're going to get. And so that concludes the basic list of the four types of oaths: the oath of expression about regular events, the useless oaths, the oath of deposit, and the oath of testimony. And going forward, we're going to get into different laws, parameters that guide the formulation of oaths, and all the details on the different types of the oaths.